all heroes were netted in the web of fate. No power, said the poets, could prevail against untiring destiny. Brendan Lehane, writing in the Time Life series Legends of Valor and published in 1984. Hello once again, I'm Don Jackson with the heartbeat of the Internet. Television has stumbled onto fantasy and taken a page from the success of Lord of the Rings. I'm thinking of 3 television series. All have their storylines planted deeply in the world of myth, magic, and a little historical truth, but all have their knaves and their heroes. A powerful start to this webcast with a big screen adaptation of a popular fairy tale. Florence and the Machine, with music from Snow White and the Huntsman. And for my money, that's the best big screen adaptation of the fairy tale. You know, I like that evil queen even more than the one on Once Upon a Time, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's begin with the origins of the fairy tale, still somewhat shrouded in mystery. Jack Zipes edited the Oxford Companion to Fairy Tales, and in the introduction was this: there is no such thing as the fairy tale. However, there are hundreds of thousands of fairy tales, and these fairy tales have been defined in so many different ways that it boggles the mind to think that they can be categorized as a genre. Why bother with distinctions when very few people necessarily want them? There is even a strong general tendency among many readers in the West to resist defining the fairy tale. It is as though one should not tamper with sacred material. By dissecting the fairy tale, one might destroy its magic, and it appears that this magic has something to do with the blessed realm of childhood and innocence. On the other hand, almost every reader of fairy tales, young and old, is curious about their magic. What is it that endows fairy tales with such enchantment? Where do these tales come from? Why do they have such a grip on us? Why do we always seem to need them? We want to know more about ourselves by knowing something more about fairy tales. We want to fathom their mysterious hold on us. End quote. That may also explain the incredible appeal of the TV series Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time had its debut on October 23, 2011 on ABC. It takes place in the fictional seaside town of Storybrooke, Maine, in which the residents are actually characters from various fairy tales and other stories that were transported to the real-world town and robbed of their original memories by the evil queen, Regina, using a powerful curse obtained from Rumpelstiltskin. In Once Upon a Time, the residents of Storybrooke have lived an unchanging existence for 28 years, unaware of their own lack of aging. The town's only hope lies with a bail bondswoman and bounty hunter named Emma Swan, the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming, who was transported from the enchanted forest within the fairy tale world as an infant before she could be cursed. As such, she is the only person who can break the curse and restore the character's lost memories. She is aided by her son Henry, with whom she has recently reunited after giving him up for adoption upon his birth, and his book of fairy tales, which holds the key to ending the curse. Some information from Wikipedia. You know, Mr. Gold is my favorite character. He makes the perfect Rumpelstiltskin. And there are so many fictional characters who are brought to life in the series. There have been many TV series and movies about legendary heroes. The History Channel and its Canadian-made Viking series and the movies explored the legend of one of their gods, Thor. Heroes and knaves, or villains, has always been an enduring theme during television ratings or the way to bring in big money at the box office. But why are we so fascinated with these ancient legends and heroes? One of my sources said, "Man has always wondered about his world. He has tried to explain to himself why things happen as they do. In the 21st century, we've got a pretty good idea about how the universe works, but so much still remains a mystery. We are so much more advanced than our predecessors where scientific knowledge is concerned. Before science, they could only imagine magic and all-powerful gods to explain what they were witnessing in the sky and on Earth. They saw the sunrise on one side of them, creep through the sky, and fall gently on the other side. How should they explain the perfect regularity of this event? Early men knew that spring and summer would always follow winter. They tried to explain why the seasons always followed one another. Also, they watched the stars move in orderly fashion through the night sky. Why was this? There must, they felt, be a reason for these regular and unchanging events. There were also the bad, unpredictable events. How could early men account for droughts or floods? How for thunder and lightning? How for fire and sickness? Why in dreams did people seem to be transported into a strange world where everything was often unrecognizable and even terrifying? The world around these people often seemed dangerous to them. They were frightened by the strange, unknown forces about them. By their myths, early men tried to humanize or personalize their world. That is, they imagined the objects around them to be persons like themselves, thoughtful beings, some with great power. All these objects, animals, plants, stars, rivers, the sun and moon, came to be gods with magic powers. Some of these supernatural beings were thought of as good and kind to men. Some were evil and brought pain and hunger and death. In Norse mythology, there was only a universe of mist in the beginning. Out of the mist and the clouds came the body of the huge frost giant, Ymir. In the same way, somewhat later, Odin, king of the gods, came out of the mist. He killed Ymir and made the earth and sky out of Ymir's body. The whole universe, earth and heaven, was supported by an ash tree, a huge ash tree. The gods lived in a heavenly city called Asgard, reached by the Bridge of the Rainbow. One of the frost giants, Loki, was an evil and dishonest god. He forced his way into Asgard and lived among the gods. He spent all his time doing mischief and trying to hurt the gods. Loki had 3 dreadful children: Death, the Midgard serpent which encircled the earth, and the giant wolf Fenrir. Death took all men, and the gods feared that someday death would take them too. According to Norse mythology, the Norse gods had reason to be afraid. The Norsemen believed that a time would come when the giants and their monstrous children would force their way into Asgard, kill the gods, and destroy the whole world. But the giants would also destroy themselves in the conflict. The Norsemen called this final destruction Ragnarok, or the twilight of the gods. And if you've seen the very violent but somewhat historically accurate History Channel series Vikings, then you might now understand the name Ragnar a little better. Perhaps the frost giants represented the storms and snow and ice of the cruel northern winter. The old Norsemen naturally feared the long, cold winter. The winter seemed to kill everything, and the Norsemen were afraid that one year winter might come and never go away. Which leads me to another TV series that has generated a lot of talk at work on Monday mornings and changed Sunday evening viewing habits. In Game of Thrones, one of the Starks' most popular phrases was, "Winter is coming." And they too had good reason to fear the dark and never-ending cold. HBO's Game of Thrones, the TV adaptation of the books by George R.R. Martin, has become immensely popular with fans the world over. On the back cover of Book 1 in this series was this, and I quote, "In a land where summers can last decades and winters a lifetime, trouble is brewing. The cold is returning, and in the frozen wastes to the north of Winterfell, sinister and supernatural forces are massing beyond the kingdom's protective wall. At the center of the conflict lie the Starks of Winterfell, a family as harsh and unyielding as the land they were born to. Sweeping from a land of brutal cold to a distant summertime kingdom of Epicurean plenty, here's a tale of lords and ladies, soldiers and sorcerers who come together in a time of grim omens. Amid plots and counterplots, tragedy and betrayal, victory and terror, the fate of the Starks, their allies, and their enemies hangs perilously in the balance as each endeavors to win that deadliest of conflicts, the Game of Thrones." End quote. And remember, the Lannisters always pay their debts, but my money is still on Tyrion to be one of the last to survive. He may be short in stature, but his knowledge and ingenuity is immense. And also, don't count out the Mother of Dragons. She will be a force to be reckoned with, especially with her creatures that breathe fire. And whatever you do, never ask author George R.R. Martin to plan your wedding. A wedding in Game of Thrones can be a deadly invitation to something other than wedded bliss. There are a few parallels between Game of Thrones and the Arthurian legend. Game of Thrones features swordsmen who are sworn to protect the king and the queen. In Arthurian legend, Lancelot was sworn to protect Guinevere, the queen. There was a recent film simply called King Arthur that gave the legend a more gritty look. Now, to me, I think it made more sense if you follow the line of thinking that in reality he fought the invading Saxons early in the 6th century. Merlin the magician was more a healer, a man who knew what herbs to prescribe for ailments. Arthur's Knights of the Round Table were actually working for the Pope, and the movie centered around them trying to provide safe and secure passage to someone under the Pope's protection away from the Saxon hordes. Guinevere was no princess serving wine to her future husband in her father's great hall. In the movie, she was held captive in the deplorable conditions of the dungeon of the man who Arthur, as a knight himself, is sent to escort to safety from the invading Saxon hordes. She is certainly no frail maiden either. She's accomplished with the bow and arrow and not afraid to go into battle. It is really a fine film, not big on the romantic aspect, but worth a look. The scene out on the ice, when Arthur and his men face the advancing Saxon army, is one destined to become classic. To me, this seemed about as real as the Arthurian legend could ever hope to be. There is one battle that we should mention, one that Merlin the magician was against. He tried to persuade King Arthur not to get involved, but Arthur wouldn't hear of it, since Leodrigan of Camelaird was an old ally of Arthur's father. Arthur rode away to war and won on behalf of his father's old friend. As it said in the Time Life series The Enchanted World, in the volume titled The Fall of Camelot, when the High King feasted in his vassal's hall, the wheel of his fate began to turn. The hall was a high one, hung with fine weaving. Long tables lined it. The Lord's own table was vast and round, not like the trestles used by other kings. The vessels that adorned it were of glass and gold, reflecting the light of torches and hearth, and the maiden who served the wine of the High King reflected the light as well. She was a tall girl. Her hair hung unbound and unornamented except for a princess's circlet, and the hair was the brown of autumn leaves, touched with gold from the sun. Her eyes were downcast as befitted a maiden. The lashes made shadows on her flesh. The robe she wore was white. The hands that held the drinking horn were long and pale. She had a scent of flowers about her. Arthur was no stranger to women. He was the High King, a golden warrior unrivaled on the field, and he had their admiration. Leodrigan was on Arthur's right, caught the High King's look and said, "That is my daughter, Lord." "A noble maiden," replied the king. He turned to speak to her, but the girl had gone from the hall. "Her name is Guinevere," said Leodrigan, then guided the talk to other matters. Arthur saw no more of Leodrigan's daughter until the day he left the king's fortress. As he mounted, a movement caught his eye. With the warrior's quick attention, he turned in the saddle. The maiden stood in a window of a low stone tower, gazing gravely at him. He lifted a hand in farewell. Then he rode away. And that is one telling of how Arthur met Guinevere. Much later, in the tales of Arthur and his Round Table, was this after the king had been betrayed by his queen and Sir Lancelot. This was written by Sir Thomas Malory in the 15th century. Then Sir Lancelot took his sword in his hand and stole to the place where he had spied a ladder beforehand, and that he took onto his arm and carried it through the garden and set it up to the window. And soon the queen was there to meet him. "I wish," said the queen, "I wish as much as you that you might come in to me." "Do you wish, madam," said Sir Lancelot, "with your heart, that I were with you?" "Yes, truly," said the queen. "Then I shall prove my might," said Sir Lancelot, "for your love." And then he laid his hands on the bars of iron and pulled at them with such might that he ripped them right out of the stone walls. And one of the bars of iron cut through the flesh of his hands to the bone. And then he leaped into the chamber to the queen. End quote. The love of Lancelot for Guinevere may just have been one of the reasons that Merlin was so against Arthur going to war and meeting his future queen. Love always seems to find its way into battle. It's in Once Upon a Time, Game of Thrones, and Vikings. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.